come to Texas A&M that he gave one of the greatest performances I have ever seen. He sat on our front porch, broke down in tears, and said he would see to it that I could go home whenever I wanted, that I got a car, which would have been of little use to me because I didn't know how to drive, and that I married the richest girl in Texas, and that I wouldn't have to wear a military uniform among other enticements. But how were we so fortunate to get you to attend West Virginia University?
When I was really little, 7 or 8 years of age, West Virginia had a guy by the name of Mark Horton. He was from Charleston, West Virginia. I lived about 14 miles south of there. But at that point in time, my only vision of West Virginia sports was not on TV, it was over the radio. And I could always get bits and pieces of the game, get down to the nitty-gritty of the game, and I would never know who won. And so I'd have to wake up the next morning to see who had won the game. But I had my deceased brother-in-law took me to a West Virginia game. And I'll never forget sitting in the end zone about 10 rows up, no one around me. There weren't very many people there. And watching that game, and we stayed in a hotel which I don't think I would stay in today, by the way.
That's where we put the visiting team.
Well, I'm not convinced that's not there anymore. But anyway, I couldn't go to sleep that night. I was so excited from watching West Virginia play and watching them win. And all of a sudden now, I had something that was really important for me because I would never miss a West Virginia game on the radio. But I think when Rod Hundley came up here, West Virginia basketball, they started playing all over the place. And he was from Charleston, West Virginia, and obviously going up 14 miles there in Charleston was a lot of school. I didn't have a chance to play against him in high school, but it made such a name for himself. He looked at the game a little bit differently than I did, and we came to the state tournament, and Rod Hundley, the late Fred Shouse, who was my first recruiter, and who I was fortunate enough to have played for here, along with another fellow who's not here anymore, George King, two of the nicest people ever. I do remember very vividly the first visit I ever got of being recruited. And I looked up the lane, he was this great big guy walking down the lane to our little tiny house, and came up and introduced himself, and I think he was talking to my mother, if I believe correctly, and I hadn't gotten home from school yet. And I go down there, and he introduced himself to me, and I introduced myself to him. And I did not say a word. I was so quiet, and so bashful, and backward, socially inept, completely. And he started talking to me about West Virginia University. And so he asked me to walk out to his car with him. And this is the only inducement I got to going to West Virginia, okay? So he pulls out a blue t-shirt and a gold t-shirt that West Virginia University basketball. And he says, which one would you like to have? I've got blue one, right? So blue's my favorite color. And I said, I'll take the blue one. So he gave the blue one. And I said, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And as I'm walking away, he also gave me the gold one. I thought that was pretty cool. But I have an awful lot of schools recruiting me when I'm a senior, a lot. And I could have gone to pretty much anywhere I wanted to go. But I really wanted to play with it. I didn't want to go anywhere else. I don't care what inducements were being offered. And obviously, they don't ever do that anymore because NCAA makes sure they don't do it. Yes. So, but I didn't want to go anywhere where I was going to be paid. My parents, particularly my mother, said that's never going to happen. And the day I decided to come to West Virginia University, I knew where I was going. I knew right away I knew I was going to come here. And I came home from school and there was 3 recruiters sitting on my front porch. I won't miss them in 3 schools. And these schools had all very badly wanted me to come. And again, some extra inducements. And I'll never forget my late mother walking out on the porch with their ever-present hot, steaming cup of coffee. And these three coaches are sitting on the front porch. They now make engagements with your or private setting. And my mother walks out of the house, and again, I don't say anything, okay, I'm really quiet. And she announces to all, she said, well, she said, you know, Jerry's home now, you can talk to him, but as far as I'm concerned, I don't want him to go anywhere except West Virginia. Well, the next day I called Fred Schaus and said, Fred, I'm coming. It wasn't much of a recruitment process.
Did your high school coach Roy Williams, not the Roy Williams we all know in Carolina, but did your high school coach have an influence on you coming to WVU?
No. I think he was a football coach. I think the smartest thing, I was the best punter in school, probably the fastest guy in school. We didn't have a car, and I ran everywhere. And he would never let me play football. Thank God he did. And, but the one thing he really talked to me about all the time was being a defensive player. And that's one of the things I think I'm probably most proud of is when you score a lot of points, people don't think you do anything different. And I wish they had the all-pro defensive team early in my career, so I would have made a lot of time. I don't think any athlete wants to know us a one-dimensional player. I judge athletes probably pretty harshly in terms of basketball. I mean, I like players who are well-rounded. I like people who are team-orientated. I like them to be good defensive players. I like to be one particularly really a gifted offensive player. Some people have been given extra gifts, and I really feel fortunate that I was given a gift to see the game in a completely different light than a lot of people. I saw the game in slow motion. You see it in slow motion, you just don't make as many mistakes.
So it comes out fairly clearly in the book that there, aside from Fred Schaus and George Hannigan, by the way, Barbara Schaus, Fred Wheeler's here.
Yes, he is here.
Let's give a round of applause for Barbara Schaus. Aside from the coaches, as you read the book, you realize there were three people who were extraordinarily influential in your life during your time here in Morgantown. Ann Denardi, Erlinda Denardi, and Willie Akers. Maybe in that order.
Well, not sure about that. They would all be number one as far as I was concerned. But growing up in a house, and again, you have to read this book for yourself. It's not, there's some very unpleasant things to read in there. But growing up in a house where you don't see love, affection, there's a lot of things negative that you take away from it. Self-esteem, feeling worthless sometimes, and also love. I don't use that word very much because I'm not quite sure what it is today. It's a tricky word for me to use. I think my kids and my wife, I think they understand that. Thank goodness they do. But I felt with Ann and Erlinda Denardi, unquestionable love. They were like my surrogate mothers. I would have never made it here in West Virginia if I hadn't met them. I would have left. I would have left, there's no question. And I'm not sure what my life would have been. But they were so important in my life, and I will never forget their kindness. I will never forget some of the locker room language they used to me. And Italians do that, you know. A few Italians in this town. But they absolutely, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how they made me feel. And two of the most important people in my life, obviously Willie Akers, will be a friend till I die. He was like my soulmate. He didn't go anywhere. I didn't go anywhere without him. He was much happier. He was much more gregarious. I kind of drug along with him. Obviously, the other teammates you had were close to him, and you care about him. But he just seemed like he knew me a little bit better. And I think you can feel, or if you see one, you probably see the other together. And but he's been a great friend of mine forever. One of the incredibly nice people that you never want to meet. And the biggest West Virginia fan and university fan of all. I love that guy.
Let's talk briefly about one game that you played in as a Mountaineer, which was the championship game in NCAA against Cal Berkeley.
It's unpleasant.
It's an unpleasant game, but I think you've been motivated more in your life by the losses than by the win. Because you remember every detail of a loss and you kind of gloss over when you win. But that game gave you an opportunity to meet Pete Newell, the Cal coach. It gave Pete an opportunity to see you play live. Of course, that flowered into a great relationship both on the 1960 Olympic team, gold medal team, Oscar Robertson, some other great players, Walt Belding in that team. It also created a relationship with Pete Newell that lasted into your late years. But talk about, if you could, the hurt of not being able to win that championship game.
You know, I think it's always interesting to me that people say things that sometimes they think people want to hear. I played for this state, and I also played for West Virginia University. I didn't play for this state. And I can so vividly remember here with the ball in my hand, can't get a shot off from one point down. I can remember the time I sat on the bench before foul. I was heartbroken. And frankly, it started kind of a long laundry list of ugly losses and bitter feelings about losing. I will tell each and every one of you, I have learned a hell of a lot more from losing than I have winning. And I'll tell you why. Because you can lose with class, or you can lose being a horse's behind. You can win with class, or you can win being a horse's behind. I chose the latter, to try to win with class and lose with class. But if things that you so crave, I'm not sure if I was craving recognition from myself, but maybe a point to prove to my father that I was different, that I was special.
Were you playing as well for your brother David that you lost in the war in Korea?
In our family, I had a brother by the name of David. He was someone who maybe one of the most unique people I've ever met in my life. And he was someone who paid attention to me, to my family, when no one else did. He was someone that somewhat encouraged me, particularly through letters when he was in the Korean War. And had a very strange incident with him one day right before he went into service. And I was little. And I'll never forget, he was out there playing basketball behind this grade school where I used to go to. There were 6 of them. And one of them said, I need a rest or something. I said, well, let me play. And they said, no, you're too little to play. And again, my language wasn't so good. And I told him, I said, you're really going to be sorry that you didn't let me play. And I said, one of these days, I said, I'm going to be one of the greatest players ever played. Made it up in my mind, of course. That's how I thought. And he threw the basketball at me, hit me with the basketball. And I remember, because of my language, him trying to catch me. Well, no one could catch me. No one. Too fast. And I took off running, and it was one of the most hurtful days of my life. They wouldn't let me play in this basketball game because I was too little. And, but I think the coolest thing of all was that, someone who I won't have an opportunity to see me play, never got a chance to see me play. And he'll be 21 forever. Someone that was part of a learning center here with his